Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's topic. It's new treatments for PTS and TBI. And our host today is Jeanette. Jeanette is the director of the network at America's Warrior Partnership. The network provides local veteran serving organizations with a connection to national resources when a veteran's request cannot be met locally. She is actually at a conference right now for the MAC VSOs, where she's sitting from. You can see her there, but I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to her for her to go ahead and continue. That's it for me, Jeanette. The floor is yours.
All right. So hello, everyone. As Allison said, I'm joining you live from the NAC VSO Conference, National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, annual conference here in Madison, Wisconsin. So pardon the noise in the background. I am at a big room, but that noise should be dissipating soon. So I'd like to welcome all of our affiliate communities, our 4-Star Alliance members, veteran serving organization, and guests to our battle rhythm today. As Allison said, our topic is new treatment options for TBI and PTSD. So today our agenda features subject matter experts Rob Beckman and Eric Kalita. Rob is the co-founder and executive director of Treat Now, and Eric is the legislative director at Treat Now. We're also going to be joined by Josh Goldberg. He is the Chief Executive Officer for Boulder Crest, and he's going to talk to us about the treatments that they have available and the things that they're doing in the veteran space. So I'd like to first invite Rob to begin his presentation.
Hello, I'm Rob Beckman of the Treat Now Coalition, a pro bono effort of mostly veterans working to end the service member suicide epidemic. Starting with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, we will recommend other proven alternative therapies with scientific validation of safety and efficacy. To date, in over 140 coalition clinics over a 12-year period, we've helped in brain wound healing of over 21,000 patients, and that's with 7,000 of them veterans. The national suicide and opioid addiction epidemics are affecting the entire force, particularly the estimated 877,450 TBI PTSD veterans. There have been nearly 220,000 suicides and opioid use disorder deaths since 2003. Let that sink in. The VA's failed protocol continues on the path of treating TBI symptoms, not the physical brain wounds. They insist on classifying brain wounds in the mental health category, attaching the stigma to brain wounded service members of having a psychologic problem. 2 decades of miss and maldiagnosed and undiagnosed wounds has contributed to a national opioid epidemic with no significant changes in outcomes for veterans. The VA's failed policy and practices vis-a-vis brain wounds has led to a systematic problem. Whether an unwritten or verbal policy, the VA denies veterans access to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which we call HBOT, whether for approved or experimental treatments, all of which are medically available because of proven safety and efficacy and the scientific evidence from worldwide studies and clinical use for decades. Let's look at some facts in the medical evidence. There have been over 109,000 veteran suicides since 2003, 109,000. However, the VA chooses to count, the 15-year trend is upward. Since 51% of veterans are not enrolled in the VA, and since data has been sketchy and conflicting for years, we can state unequivocally that the national veteran suicide epidemic will continue. Unless the VA and DoD do more than talk about collaboration and issue public service announcements, there will be no positive healing action nor resources put into more than talk. We must hold them accountable to their word. They must do all that is humanly possible to interrupt the downward spiral of drug dependency, depression, and death that accompanies untreated brain wounds. The pill-pushing VA protocols led to over 679,000 veterans being prescribed over 847 million opioid pills between 2006 and 2014. The sheer quantity, doses, and variety of prescriptions, whether for pain, headaches, sleep, neuroses, tinnitus, frustration, rage, or memory, overwhelms the veteran and the caregivers. Uncounted change orders from a rotating set of sometimes unqualified set of healthcare providers continue to lead to perpetual brain fog and overdose deaths and perpetual brain fog to this day. There are few veterans with brain wounds who have been through the DoD and VA medical systems who do not have a horror story or two to report. There have been over 20 scientifically controlled clinical trials completed since 2007 testing the use of HBOT for TBI and PTSD. Over 750 veteran patients have shown improvement, reflecting the safety and efficacy of HBOT for TBI and PTSD. Studies and clinical evidence demonstrate that HBOT eliminates suicidal ideation. Healing a brain restores function and hope, and eliminates or dramatically reduces symptoms and allows patients to get off almost all their drugs, especially drugs that are black box labeled, warning of suicidal ideation. Treat Now's motto is heal brains, stop suicides, restore lives. Dr. Paul Hartch's recent meta-analysis of HBOT research worldwide shows uniform safety and efficacy, including in all 5 USG studies. Data continue to demonstrate that a full course of HBOT treatment eliminates suicidal ideation. 21,000 successes in over 140 clinics is not just affecting veterans. First responders, athletes, car accident victims, victims of falls and strokes are all being helped to heal. Remember, there are millions of brain wounds every year, in addition to combat casualties, that are similarly untreated, undiagnosed, and at eye-popping costs. Let's look at legislation at the state level, where they have stepped in when the DoD and VA are failing. 10 states have enacted HBOT for TBI PTSD legislation. Oklahoma, Texas, Indiana, Kentucky, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Maryland, Wyoming, and Virginia. 5 of those have funded more than $2.9 million for treatment to date, with plus-ups on the way. 6 more states are drafting legislation: Ohio, Missouri, Colorado, Nevada, Iowa, and Michigan. That could mean 32% of states recognize the problem and a new solution. They intend to bring HBOT into mainstream medical standards for treating TBI and PTSD. 2 congressional bills from Representatives Murphy of North Carolina and Biggs of Arizona have been introduced. Senatorial bills are about to be introduced. All of this information, by the way, is available on our website, treatnow.org. We are encouraging all listeners, veteran service and help organizations and foundations to educate their legislators at the state and national levels to require national HBOT legislation. Research can continue while treatment gets funded. Veterans have to be told the treatment exists. The VA and DoD must not continue to insist that HBOT treatment is just too dangerous, unproven, or too costly. This is not a question of science or cost. They know. They can act. We must push them to do the right thing. Their silence and obstruction is costing lives every day. I'd like to hand it over to Eric for further discussion.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome everybody. I'm going to do a short review of the economic and medical impact of TBI and DFU veterans. Since 1990, veteran population has decreased from 29 million to less than 19 million today, while the service-connected disabilities have doubled from 2.5 to over 5 million. Cash payments are outpacing the number of veterans with service-connected disabilities, the majority over 50% disability ratings. The financial trend is just not going to be sustainable. From 2019 to 2022, the VA budget for mental health, suicides, homelessness, caregiver support, and opioid use disorder average yearly escalation 18.3%, essentially doubling every 5 years, which is not sustainable. Is the cost impacting the level of care our veterans are receiving? You be the judge. From 2008 to 2020, the VA budget has expended $86.1 billion on mental health and $7.7 billion on medical health research, and not a single measurable element of improvement in MTBI suicides. Our takeaway from all this is that what we're doing is not working. Everyone has been focused on this, but we're not seeing the results. And that's a quote from the National Director of Veteran Affairs and Rehab for the American Legion. 877,450 TBI PTSD veterans' economic impact to the U.S. taxpayer, that's you, is an average of $118.1 billion annually, 4.7 trillion over the 40-year lifespan. That equates to 5.3 million per TBI veteran over a lifetime cost, for approximately 135,000 per year per veteran. We can treat and heal those veterans for 1/2 of 1% of the total lifetime cost with HBOT. So now I want to talk a little bit about the DFU, diabetic foot ulcer and lower limb amputation epidemic, because the lack of access to HBOT or an approved on-label treatment is killing our veterans. What we are seeing is a VA national policy, whether that's written, unwritten, or verbally applied, to keep HBOT out of 14 FDA CMS TRICARE approved mainstream standard medical services available to veterans. HBOT for DFUs is a worldwide standard of care, except in the VA. The VHA lower limb amputation average annual deaths is 35.5% of the national deaths, and veterans only represent 7% of the total population. 56% of diabetic foot ulcers will become infected, and 1 in 5 will require amputation. Lifetime healthcare costs for people with limb loss is over $509,000 per patient. Estimated cost of private public insurance, $12 billion annually. DFUs have a 5-year mortality rate higher than the rates for breast cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer all combined. We put together a 50-page report on data provided by Undersecretary of Health, Dr. Stephen Lieberman, and presented to Congressman Greg Murphy. And here are the results from the data provided by the VA. 796,340 veterans have died from diabetic foot ulcer and lower limb amputation in the past 22 years. That's an average of 36,000 per year. And in total, more than all veterans killed in action in all U.S. wars since the beginning of World War I. The current VHA diabetic foot ulcer, lower limb amputation veteran mortality rate is 64 to 71% within 3 years post-LLA surgery. 79.4% of VHA veteran DFU and LLAs are diabetic with an average age of 66.2 years. That means the majority are over 65 and are CMS eligible for HBOT treatments that is covered under insurance since 2002. The medical industry average is 74% heal rate for DFU cases when treated with aggressive wound care and coincided with HBOT treatments. Veterans are not being provided the doctrine of informed consent on HBOT under the Code of Medical Ethics, Opinion 2.11, violating medical ethics. On a 20-year average, 93.7% of 2.2 million diabetic veterans in the VHA do not receive HBOT or are not informed of its medical option. An estimated annual $2.7 billion spend for veteran with DFU and LLA in surgical, hospitalization, aftercare, prosthesis, wheelchair, and disability costs. In 2021, all DFU veterans could have been treated with HBOT for 4% of the associated amputation costs and extended life and limb costs. Under the VA Mission Act of 2018, Title I, the VA Secretary shall not limit the types of hospital care, medical services, or extended care services covered veterans may receive under this section if it is the best medical interest of the veteran to receive such hospital care, medical services, or extended services as determined by the veteran and the veteran's healthcare provider. The bottom line here is TFU veterans are being denied access to approved medical care under this federal act. The Veteran Access to Care Act of 2014 allows veterans to receive their health care from non-VA facilities. The VA does not operate a single HBOT chamber across over 1,100 VA facilities, mandating DFU veterans be referred to outside services. DFU veterans are being denied access in violation of this federal act. So what we are asking is we need everyone's help in reversing this medical malpractice and unjust treatment of denial by bringing awareness and transparency to the American public. And so with that, I'm going to turn final comments and summary back over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Eric. A few national priorities from our perspective to end the veteran suicide epidemic and get HBOT approved for TBI and PTSD, as well as applied for diabetic foot ulcers, where it is a national scandal, so many being losing their lower limbs and thus getting a death certificate. We have to educate, train, distribute to mainstream medical industry on the medical benefits of HBOT for MTBI, along with other alternative therapies. Warriors are wounded psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, behaviorally. Veterans are agreed, however, that healing the brain wounds allows other treatments to be more effective. We have to develop and deploy a counter-marketing campaign through the HBOT community to counter VA and Big Pharma on the medical misinformation regarding HBOT, where they continue to claim, despite evidence confirmed worldwide, of safety and efficacy. We have to develop an HBOT national nonprofit and advocate network to identify and engage with national news through social media, newsprint, radio, podcasts, and TV to allow transparency so that the American public, VSOs, see the medical evidence of HBOT healing concussions and off-label DFUs on label. We want to make the VA and DoD heroes in this, but we can't if they resist. Through our networking channels, we have to educate and recruit a legal entity on those diabetic foot ulcers and why denied access and lack of informed consent is medical malpractice. And we want to take every opportunity to inform the VA and DoD that the best suicide prevention strategy begins with root cause analysis to find and treat brain wounds. I'd like to thank you from Treat Now. And back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob and Eric, for your presentation. We're going to move on to Josh Goldberg. Josh is the Executive Director of Boulder Crest Foundation, and he's going to talk to you about some other treatment options for PTSD and TBI. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will address them at the end of Josh's presentation. Josh, I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jeanette, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to be here and for you making the time to be with us today. So if you haven't heard of Boulder Crest Foundation is a national nonprofit organization that exists for one reason, and that's to make sure that members of the military, veteran, and first responder communities can live great lives. And to us, a great life is a life that's filled with passion and purpose and service and growth and connection. And when I think about the suicide epidemic that Bob and Eric just talked about, certainly to us, the opposite of suicide is a life worth living. And that's a big focus of what we do at Boulder Crest. And the truth is, as the gentleman just pointed out, that about 1/3 of people in the veteran community are struggling in different ways with a range of mental health challenges. And unfortunately, traditional approaches to mental health have been ineffective for the overwhelming majority of them. And if you want to read something interesting, there's a great article by a psychiatrist named Dr. Jonathan Shedler, who wrote an article called "Where is the Evidence for Evidence-Based Treatments?" And Shedler found that only about 3% of people who are struggling will meaningfully benefit from traditional mental health over and beyond the military and veteran community, them just being a function of a system that's not working well. So everything we do at Boulder Crest is based on the science of something called post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is the idea that in many respects, what doesn't kill us can make us wiser. It can help us and cause us to catalyze growth and transformation in our lives, and to, in fact, live a better life than we did ever before. And the reason why this idea of post-traumatic growth is so important is because of what I think is the most important word in the English language, and that word is hope. For far too many people, we've convinced them that because they've gone through difficult and bad things in their life is going to be bad as a result. We've convinced people that they have diagnoses that are often fatal and final, and that nothing good can ever happen again in their life. And why post-traumatic growth is so important as an idea is captured in the words of a lady named Mandy Piper. And Mandy lost her first responder fiance back in 2015 to an ISIS-related shooting in San Bernardino. And Mandy said that you have to know that post-traumatic growth exists in order for it to happen. You have to know it's okay for things to happen after really bad things. And one of the things that's really interesting in a world where most people have never heard of post-traumatic growth, or PTG, is when we introduce it to people in our programs, and I'll talk more about those in a second, is we say, you've heard of PTSD, and everyone's like, yep. And I said, have you ever heard of post-traumatic growth? Everyone says no, and you explain it. And the most common response is, why the blank has nobody ever told me this before? And it is this idea that I cannot see what I cannot be, or cannot be what I cannot see. And so our journey to really figure out a different way of supporting people who are struggling with any range of mental health challenges, from anxiety and depression to suicidality, has been a really interesting journey, because in September of this year, we will mark the 10th anniversary of opening a place that we call Boulder Crest, Virginia, located in Bluemont, Virginia, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And when we opened Boulder Crest, Virginia 10 years ago, it was the first privately funded wellness center in the country dedicated solely to veterans and their families. And the principal goal in opening it was to create a space where veterans of combat and their families could come together to rest, reconnect, and recharge. And the need for that was an outgrowth of two things that came from our founders, Ken and Julia Falk. Ken was a Navy bomb disposal tech for almost 22 years in the United States Navy. And Julia was essentially a single mom for 14 of those 21 years, because Ken was gone all the time doing what's considered to be the world's most dangerous job. And so they understood that the life of the military is difficult, it's challenging, and it's disconnecting. And so the goal was to create a space where people could come and reconnect. The other kind of origins of our story come from the fact that starting in 2004, many members of the explosive ordnance disposal community were hard hit by the war and by IEDs. And they wanted to create a space where families could come after long stays in the hospital to rest and reconnect and recharge. And so that was our initial idea. Really, Boulder Crest as an organization was really designed to be a place where people could connect with each other. And over the course of the first several months, we were hosting a number of different families. And one weekend, we were hosting a caregiver retreat, which was primarily young women whose husbands had lost limbs as EOD techs. And there was one woman who was sitting by herself, and Ken, who, like I said, is our founder, went over to see her, and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" And she said, "It's going amazing. I really appreciate that you guys built this place. It's absolutely amazing." And he said, "Well, why aren't you sitting with the other folks? Well, what's going on?" And she said, "All I can do is sit here and think that I wish my husband had lost his legs." And Ken said, "Well, that's an awful thing to say. Why would you say that?" And she said, "Because at least then we'd know what was wrong with him." And Ken said, "Well, what is wrong with him?" And she said, "Well, the doctors say he has PTSD, but none of the treatments that they're offering him have provided any value to him." And that led us on a search to really try to understand what could be done for people who are struggling. And again, whatever you call struggle, by whatever name, PTSD, anxiety, depression, MDD, GAD, doesn't matter what acronyms you want to use. When we think about struggle, the question is, what was it that helped people who were really struggling, who felt like they lived in the darkness and that nothing good would ever happen again? What helps those folks to live a great life? And what helps people be as productive at home as they were on the battlefield? And so we went on a journey, and we began by starting to talk to a range of mental health professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers from around the country. And we asked them that question: what helps people who are really struggling, who've come home from war and really are struggling to find some way to the peace, to live a great life? And what we got told was nothing works to do that, because that's not really the point of the system. The point of the system is to understand someone's symptoms and then to help them manage and mitigate the distress associated with their struggle. but growth, possibility, opportunity, hope are not on the table. They're not on the menu. And the last stop in our journey of this trip to try to figure out what would work for people, we met a doctor by the name of Rich Tedeschi. And Rich is a clinical psychologist who's been practicing for almost 44 years at this point. And Rich began to describe work that he had done starting in the 1980s, where he was trying to understand where wisdom came from. So Rich and his colleague Lawrence Calhoun were trying to figure out what was it that made certain people wise about what it meant to live a great life. And in the process of interviewing a bunch of people to try to understand where wisdom came from, what Rich and Lawrence learned was what the ancient Greeks knew thousands of years ago. The ancient Greeks had a saying that all great wisdom comes from suffering. All great wisdom comes from suffering. And based on all the research that Lawrence and Rich did in 1995, they coined the term post-traumatic growth to describe the ways in which people who go through incredible difficulty and struggle and hardship and trauma often reports that it serves as a catalyst for growth and transformation, and that their life is more authentic and fulfilling and purposeful than it was before. And people who experience post-traumatic growth experience growth in one or more of 5 areas. They report that they grow in the area of new possibility, that their life, it didn't go the way that they thought it was going to go, but the path that they were given for their life was filled with possibilities they never could have imagined. The second was deeper relationships, the idea that they encountered people because of their suffering, because of their struggle, who helped them realize not only their own humanity, but the value they had to other people. The third is personal strength, the idea that what didn't kill me does in fact make me stronger. The fourth is appreciation for life, the idea that when you lose something and you lose someone you can't replace, you often have a greater sense of gratitude for what you did have. And the last is something called spiritual and existential change. And Boulder Crest is not a faith-based organization. When we think about this idea of spirit, we think about this idea of character, relationships to others, and a sense of service to others. And this idea of existential is about asking questions about our lives. And like Aristotle said, an unexamined life isn't worth living. So Rich tells us all of this back in about 2013, 2014. And we asked him if we could build a program designed to train combat veterans who were struggling mightily to transform their struggle into strength and growth. And Dr. Tedeschi said that he didn't know if it was possible, but he'd be willing to give it a shot. And so in May of 2014, a program called Warrior Path was born. Warrior Path is the first ever program designed based on the science of post-traumatic growth. And we began piloting Warrior Path in June of 2014. And by the end of 2015, it became very clear to us that it was having outsized impacts. It was making a significant difference in the lives of people who were struggling. Now, we do Warrior Path for up to 8 people at a time. We do male programs and female programs run separately. And in the early part of 2016, Dr. Tedeschi and his colleague, Dr. Moore, who was an Army psychologist at one point, began to study Warrior Path for an 18-month period of time. Because the truth is that if you ever have the chance to visit Boulder Crest, you'll see it's a beautiful place. And you come there and people love on you, people support you, people guide you. It's peer-based programming. You're going to feel better. But the question isn't what happens after 7 days on site. The question is what happens 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later. And what the doctors found was that the impact of Warrior Path wasn't just sustained, but that people were significantly better 18 months later, and that their life had a new sense of meaning and purpose, and that they were truly walking the path of post-traumatic growth. And based on the success of that effort in 2017, we acquired a second location in Arizona that we call Boulder Crest, Arizona. It's about an hour south of Tucson in Sonoyta, Arizona. And then in 2019, we partnered with the co-founders of the Home Depot, Arthur Blank and Bernie Marcus, who were starting something called the Avalon Action Alliance, which was focused at addressing the major causes of veteran suicide, which were major depression disorder and mental health challenges, 1. 2 is undiagnosed and misdiagnosed traumatic brain injury. And the third was substance abuse. And we all know veterans who have 1 of those, 2 of those, and all 3 of those 3 challenges. And a part of that Avalon Action Alliance was to expand Warrior Path around the country. And so as I sit here today, there are now 13 teams around the country that deliver Warrior Path basically every month in 9 different locations around the country. We have Boulder Crest locations in Arizona and Virginia. We have partners in Washington, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Maine, and Texas. And then we have 2 mobile training teams who travel around the country and deliver programs. And so what Warrior Path is a 90-day program that starts with 7 days on the ground at one of those locations around the country. And then students are supported for the next 90 days through ongoing education, video conferences, a private app that we have called MyPath, and then they're part of that forever. And again, as we've grown, the impact of this has continued to get better. We're talking about symptom reduction, people coming in on average with a pretty significant PTSD diagnosis, although a diagnosis is not required. and leaving some 90 days later, well below the clinical threshold. Depression, stress, and anxiety reductions of over 50%, and most importantly, huge explosions in the amount of growth people are experiencing, upwards of 60%. And so that program, for somebody to apply to that program, if you're interested, it's eligible for combat veterans and first responders. There's 2 different applications. If you are a first responder who was a veteran, you can fill out either application. And you fill that out, and within about 3 days, you'll be contacted by one of our team members, and we'll have the conversation. And really, from our perspective, there are 2 groups of people that don't do well in Warrior Path that we don't serve. The first is folks that have significant substance abuse challenges, and they would be better off going to get detoxed and getting that sorted before they try to come through the program. And again, like I said, we have partners for that. And the second is people who are just looking for a retreat or another great experience, because Warrior Path is hard work. One of my favorite testimonials came from a Navy SEAL who said that this was the emotional equivalent of Hell Week. And so the other thing we do at Boulder Crest is we continue to do our Family Rest and Reconnection program, which is available about 45% of our calendar year. And that is available for combat veterans to go on first come, first serve with their families and get away. All of that is free. All of Warrior Path is free of charge to participants. There's no insurance or anything like that. There's no paperwork. There's obviously applications, but there's no insurance or anything like that. And so that's kind of what we've embarked upon. And a big part of this challenge of trying to find what may be said to be alternative approaches to post-traumatic stress and related challenges is to remember that the first key to any kind of successful intervention is hope. The first key is the belief that somehow my life could ever be good again. And if all we're trying to help people do is better endure their suffering, better manage their symptoms, better minimize the distress they're experiencing, we don't ever give people the opportunity to live a great life again. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote that says that death isn't the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies inside while still alive. And I fear that we've convinced far too many people that because of the bad things they've experienced in their life's going to be bad as a result. And if people believe that, then suicide's not a far cry from it's kind of a foreseeable option. And so we have to do better. And to us, that starts with an approach based in post-traumatic growth and based in the recognition that what doesn't kill us can in fact make us stronger and make us wiser. So for more information, certainly you can go to bouldercrest.org and read about it. Again, if you have folks that either on this call or people you're interested in helping help, they can go on to warriorpath.org and apply for the program. And then we'll sort of take it from there. And I mentioned the eligibility criteria. So look forward to your questions, look forward to getting the chance to have a conversation about a different way of looking at challenges, because ultimately, I think a big part of the challenge we have is how we look at the challenge that we have. So thank you guys for the opportunity to be here. And I'll certainly be happy to answer those questions I see in the chat when we get to the Q&A part.
Josh, it looks like you've got 2 questions in the chat. First of all, somebody wants to know, how do you help support the family?
So there are 2 ways that we do that. The first is for Warrior Path alumni. We do 4 times a year, we run a program in partnership with a group called Songwriting with Soldiers, which is a Nashville-based nonprofit. And so part of the idea is there's no question that bringing the family along as part of the journey is really important, but it's also important to note that our organization, the idea for Boulder Crest was Julia Falk's idea because of her experience. And so we recognize the challenge that it takes. So that's the first part. And the second part is our Family Rest and Reconnection program, providing a place and a space for families to get to come together and like I said, rest, reconnect, and recharge, and have the opportunity to just get away from life for a little bit. And like I said, free of charge. The second question I see up there is about sharing the PTG curriculum. So what I would say about that is we do have partners that we have agreements with that we share our curriculum. We do not share the curriculum in terms of the instructor guide and other materials. Broadly, I can certainly share a syllabus or other kind of top line materials. And then there's a couple of books we can also mention that we could share that provide more information about post-traumatic growth. And part of what we're working on is also being able to certify other organizations in post-traumatic growth. One of the things we have is the Boulder Crest Institute for Post-Traumatic Growth, led by Dr. Rich Tedeschi. And that's a big part of our vision as we move forward, is how do we spread the word on this? The third question is Texas. Our partner in Texas is a group called the Eagle Oak Retreat Foundation, based in Italy, Texas, which is near Waxahachie and about an hour from Dallas, Texas, where I happen to grow up. And then the last question I see from Bernie, from an indigenous population perspective. So we have sought to work out in Arizona with the Navajo Nation and other Native American groups, I would say that just sort of off the cuff without having a great sense is I would say it's probably a relatively small percentage of folks who come through with a background as a Native American and or indigenous population. And it's definitely something that we're open to do for sure. Had conversations about it and happy to have more conversations about it for sure.
And Josh, you've got one more question. Do you collect data on outcomes at Boulder Crest?
Theodore, do we collect data? Yes, we collect lots of data. So, we did this 18-month study on 8 cohorts of Warrior Path. So like I said, each cohort is about 6 to 8 people. So that was 49 people with about 250 questions done before they started, once they arrived at the 7-day mark, and then at 90 days, 180 days, 1 year, and 18 months. And with a response rate of about 96%. And so that was the big study we did that demonstrated the impact of the program. And then on an ongoing basis, we collect data on everyone who comes through the program. So the moment they apply, we do a survey with them that looks at a range of different things in 3 areas. One is, I know Casey's 240 questions. We cut the doctors way down. You know how they are with questions. We do symptom reduction. So that for us is the post-traumatic stress checklist. It's the DAS, which is the depression, anxiety, and stress scale, and it's the PHQ-9 or the depression screener. It's quality of life improvement. So it's about relationships, financial wellness, physical wellness, pain levels. And then it is post-traumatic growth and sort of what they call cognitive flexibility, which is the capacity to look at their challenges and experiences in a different lens. And so we measure those things now, like I said, but when someone applies, once they arrive at the 7-day mark, which is what we call the initiation, and then at the 90-day mark. And one of the things that's been striking about the impact is as we've grown the number of teams, those numbers have gotten even better, which I'm really, really proud of the partners we have. And just to name check them, it's Gratitude America in Florida, Camp Southern Ground in Georgia, Big Red Barn in South Carolina, Travis Mills Foundation up in Maine, Sheepdog Impact Assistance in Arkansas, Post Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation in Washington State, and then Eagle Oak Retreat Foundation in Texas. And so part of it for us is really having this thriving partnership ecosystem. And then on the traumatic brain injury side of our partners, we partner with the Marcus Institute for Brain Health and a number of academic medical centers. So short answer is very, very big, making sure that what we do is as good as it can possibly get. And one of the big things since Warrior Path is in its edition 5.5 is to update it every year, is to keep it alive, to keep it vibrant, to keep it engaged, and to benefit from the fact that now we have 13 teams filled with combat veterans and first responders and peers who are doing that work. So I mentioned Casey, yes, lots of questions. We've really tried to distill that down because it is a lot and sometimes you get survey fatigue. As to Jennifer, to your question, we are working on the certification for providers of a range of different ilk to be able to become post-traumatic growth certified. And it's important to say this, Warrior Path is a program, post-traumatic growth is a philosophy, which means that whatever kind of modality you may practice, maybe it's EMDR, prolonged exposure, whatever it might be, is post-traumatic growth just an idea about what's possible for people who've experienced trauma. And for far too many people, the mindset is trauma is inherently diminishing. So if I go through it, my life's going to be diminished. And that can't be the case. So really PTG is about understanding there's another side of the story. And then Scott, on the follow-up side of things. So our view is really that Warrior Path is a lifelong program. So the formal structured part of that program is 90 days. And the community we have through the app, through alumni support, through ongoing events and programs is designed to be a long-term effort to stay engaged, that people become part of this world and become part of a community based in post-traumatic growth. And that's really what we've seen. Ultimately, the way I look at success is it's not helping people feel better, it's helping people do better. And a few years ago, we did a kind of a quick and dirty qualitative assessment to understand the impact of a Warrior Path participant. Because one of our beliefs is that nobody's more powerful than a veteran. And that is true in a negative sense, that you can clear a room, and that is true in a positive sense. And what the results of that study demonstrated was that the average Warrior Path participant positively impacted the lives of 500 people in their families and in their communities. And for a community that is so eager to continue to serve, what better way to be able to do that? And the last question I see, Bart, from you on the service dogs, if somebody has a service dog, certainly they can bring that service dog as long as the service dog is trained with them to the program. And we've had success with that. We've had people at times where they realize that they would rather not have the service dog with them and have someone else there. But yes, absolutely. Of course, if someone has a service dog is welcome to join them for the program. And I'll turn it over to Rob and Eric because there's a question in there for you guys.
Rob, you're going to take that?
Rob here. The standard treatment is 40 dives administered in a medical grade chamber. We have scholarships. The average dive is $250. Reductions for veterans are possible all over the country. In fact, in Tel Aviv, you can get treated for free. They'll treat any U.S. veteran for free. Important to recognize that with one exception, there have been no suicides after full treatment with HBOT. And as we're discovering with professional athletes and CTE, traumatic brain injury, PTSD, substance abuse, addictions of any kind lead to brain injury, which is a progressive cycle in too many cases, degenerative and final unless interrupted. So I want to emphasize that 40 is a standard number. That's protocol. But some people are much, much, much more wounded than 40 dives will accomplish. Brigadier General took 120 dives. Joe Namath took 120 dives. But what we're talking about is healing the brain and, if you will, turning the software on. But first, you got to fix the hard drive. We've run into way too many people who've come through the VA system who felt absolutely wonderful for the 2 or 3 or 4 month period. And then they can't get the same drugs, the TLC, and they go back to self-medicating. And whether they're on active duty or retired, they can't get the support that they did before. So we have seen extraordinary results after 40 dives.
Well, I'd like to thank Rob, Josh, and Eric for wonderful presentations. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Allison for the breakout activity.
Thank you, Jeanette. For the next 25 minutes, we're going to go into breakout groups. In a few minutes, I'm going to open the breakout room for your collaboration activity. Remember, this is a conversation. So the leads are there just to get the conversation started. And you know, as part of a discussion, you should all go ahead and turn your cameras on when you get in and be ready to have that conversation. Topic 1 is HBOT, Heal Brain Stop Suicide, Restore Life. That's with Robert and Eric. Topic 2 is Reframing the Narrative with Josh Goldberg from Boulder Crest. Topic 3 is New Thoughts and Alternative Methods of PTS. That's with Lynn Marilla from Eagle Rock Camp. And topic 4 is Caregiver Support. That's Stacy Shade-Wire from Brainline. So in order to save time, please do not introduce yourself. Just say your name and where you're from, and we'll be back together in 20 minutes. I'm going to open the rooms now. So let's go ahead and go through our key takeaways. So group 1, Eric, did you guys want to share out your 3 main key takeaways, or is somebody from your group going to share that for us?
No, I can start, and Rob, you can chime in. I think the biggest takeaway for us is that HBOT is a suicide ideation eliminator. It's a physical brain wounding healing treatment, unlike the standard treatment protocol at the VA of treat the symptoms. That's why we've had such a high rate of suicides and opioid use disorders within the VA and outside the VA with veterans. That's a failed protocol. 140 clinics, over 20,000 vets and first responders and athletes that have been treated successfully for TBIs. Dr. Daphne Denham has got some great work going on up in North Dakota treating student athletes with great success using right eye and brain scope for testing analysis. It's a proven and safe treatment protocol, contrary to what the VA and DOD may be saying. We've got a world compelling medical evidence of clinical trials completed. It's a standard of treatment in the Israeli military force. If it's good enough for the Israeli military, why isn't it being used in the U.S.? And I think collectively, with all the people that were on this call and across the U.S. that are working in the industry, treating vets with HBOT, we need to put our minds together and look how we can start a marketing campaign to bring HBOT forward as a standard treatment for all veterans and people with TBIs. 3.5 million people a year suffer from TBIs across the country. Majority of those car accident fall victims. There's treatment here that can help heal those wounds, and we need to migrate that effort forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. All right. Topic 2, reframing the narrative. That was with Josh. Josh, do you want to share out, or do you want someone from your group?
I decided to volunteer to do that, and we had a beautiful discussion. Super grateful to everybody in it. And I think at the heart of this was the recognition that at the center of all these efforts sits the veteran and a person of respect and dignity whose voice should be heard and should be heard the loudest. And I think that that idea of doing things with as opposed to and making sure we listen was a really powerful part. And then recognizing sort of the concentric circles around that and sort of the ways in which you engage with and support family members as part of that process, the ways in which you can train, whether it's mental health professionals or other folks who are seeking to help is a big deal. And that making sure that folks are part of a community and a community where they're able to meaningfully engage in service to others and continue to be of service is really powerful. And then the last thing I think to make this possible is to recognize that obviously veterans come out of the military and to continue to work in our parlance at Boulder Crest is left of boom is what are we doing when people are in to shape their perspectives and attitudes about a range of things. And really kind of making sure the audio matches the video as it relates to if folks are struggling, they can seek help and continue on with their career versus it makes you persona non grata. So a really positive, powerful discussion. Really grateful to everybody.
That's actually, yeah, it sounds like a really positive discussion. And I didn't even think about just people who were still active duty. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm glad you guys talked about that in your discussion. Topic 3, new thoughts and alternative methods on PTS. That was with Lynn. Lynn, are you sharing or are you having someone from your group? Oh, she cannot start her video. Sorry, let's see if I can do something for that. Let's see. What are we?
Allison, I can't start my video because you turned me off a while ago.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm trying to find you in the participant list for some reason. Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Let's see. Ask to start video. Let's see if that works, Lynn. Perfect.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
All right, nice job. Yeah, we talked a lot about different kinds of therapies that are emerging. Personally, I'm excited about HBOT because it's been around a long time and I'm glad it's coming into its own. We talked about art and agricultural therapies and how much they're growing. We talked about the need that no matter what you do, you have to include the family because when the warrior's wounded, the family was wounded and they have to heal together. You can't heal the warrior and send him home. He'll fail almost immediately. It takes a village. It takes all of us working together because we can't all do everything. We need Boulder Crest. We need HBOT. We need each other out here. Another topic that is a hot topic for us, and is, I think, for a couple of other participants in our group, the moral and spiritual injury needs to be healed. And the conversation came around, when's the VA going to do it? I can tell you from our viewpoint, the VA is not going to do it because we partner with Reboot Combat Recovery, and they have a beautiful moral and spiritual healing program for first responders and veterans, and then the general population. They have been, I'm going to speak for them for a second. They've been doing they've been doing their program. I think it's 12 years now, and I think the number is 14,000 veterans with a success rate in the high 90 percentiles. Almost everybody, it's like 97 or 98% of their people that attend graduate. You combine what we're working on now is proving that our program of marriage and family combined with Reboot makes both of us better. And it goes back to that collaborative point. So we have even integrated in all kinds of art therapy. We're talking to Veterans Healing Farm in Hendersonville, North Carolina, about how can we partner together to do agritherapy. So we're pulling this together to come around the veteran and the family. And I think I don't want to make this about Eagle Rock, but I think we all have to do that. We all have to come together. There's several people here that I'm seeing faces that I would love to have additional conversations with when this is over. We've got to keep it. I see Allison's great big smile. We've got to keep this stuff going, because this is what lifts our families up and what heals them all as a family and keeps that divorce rate down. Our tagline is, we're a family saving suicide prevention organization, and we right now are in the middle of averting our 21st one. So, you know, we're making a difference. You guys make a difference, and it takes all of us. And as things emerge, I think we have to share them and keep this conversation going.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. And I'm going to going over to topic 4, caregiver support, because that segued right into it. It does take a family.
It does, and I thank you. Lynn stole all of I was gonna say.
Go, Stacy.
but we really yes, the veterans sit at the center of as Josh said, but recognizing, uplifting the family members, the caregivers, and it's not necessarily a spouse. You know, just keep in mind that it could be the child, it could be the parent, it could be whoever the veteran deems as the caregiver. And so just when you're advertising your services and your programs, or as you're taking in all of that metric data, you know, how are you counting the caregiver? You know, are you asking those questions again? Because agreed, it does take the village. It does, you know, you're helping the veteran if you help the caregiver. So I don't want to keep anybody much longer. I think everything else was mentioned. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. That was excellent. I wish I could be at all your discussions. I'm going to share my screen once more, because we have an opportunity that came up, and I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Dole from Progressive. He has an exciting opportunity that actually is kind of timely. So we added this in because we wanted to share it with everybody. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for letting me be here this afternoon talking to you about Progressive's Keys to Progress program. So I've been a part of the Keys to Progress program for Progressive Insurance for the last 10 years or so. We've been giving vehicles to veterans in need throughout the country for the last 11 years. And this year we'll be giving our 1,000th vehicle away to veterans who are needing transportation to get back on their feet. It's a program that's we're targeting all 50 states this year, actually. And as we did last year we were able to give a vehicle away in all 50 states. And then we gave, I think, 101 vehicles away. So we gave several away in several states, including a semi and 5 commercial vehicles as well. So it's a fantastic program for veterans in need who just don't have transportation right now, or don't have transportation that's reliable at this point. So, and what we've done in the last 3 years, the program's evolved to where we're actually purchasing vehicles and teaming up with Enterprise Rental Car. We're purchasing vehicles that are probably 2 to 3 years old, less than 40 to 50,000 miles. And we're giving those vehicles to applicants in the states where you work. We also team up with charitable, veteran-focused charities, nonprofits throughout the country to identify applicants, and that's kind of why I'm here. So we're looking to identify applicants that you may work with that need transportation or need reliable transportation, and that's what we do. The company lives by the golden rule, and we're just trying to give back to veterans who have served us so well, and do what we do best, and that's caring for our customers and caring for people that need transportation. I'm also, and I did share a one-pager in the chat. Hopefully it came through. I'm also going to share 2 applications in the chat. One of the applications says PL for personal lines. That's for the individual who needs transportation, so a car or a vehicle to drive to work for their family. That application would be, if you have an applicant you may be aware of that might need transportation, if you can send that application to them, and then they'll email it back to us, or they can send it to you and you can email it to us. I'll also provide the email addresses as well. Now there will be a second application as well. Like I said earlier, we've provided vehicles to businesses and nonprofit or veteran-focused charities as well. We've given away 16 vehicles to nonprofits and veteran-focused charities in the last 2 years. So, Allison, do you have a question?
No, we got to wrap it up. So
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna share those as well. I'll also put my email address in there too. If anybody wants to reach out to me so I can talk to your organization, I'll be happy to do so. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
thank you. And we'll include this with after action as well. And if anybody needs connection with anybody and you can't find them, just contact me and I will get you connected. So I'm here for you guys. Jeanette, I'm going to let you close this out really quick.
All right. So I'd like to thank all of our presenters today. This was a really great battle rhythm. I'd also like to thank all of you for collaborating and sharing your experiences and thoughts. Here at America's Warrior Partnership, we partner with communities to improve veterans' quality of life and thereby reduce veterans' death by suicide and self-harm. We believe that communities are best equipped to improve the lives of veterans. Our goal at America's Warrior Partnership and our goal for today is to provide community partners like yourselves with support, information, and the best practices to help you deliver quality services to veterans in your community. Our next battle rhythm is going to be the second Monday of July, and that is July 10th. And that's due to the 4th of July holiday. The battle rhythm will be focused on empowering veteran employment in the post-pandemic world. Sounds a bit heavy. So those of you that help veterans get employment, please join us for that. We hope you all can attend. Goodbye, all of you from Wisconsin. Hope you all have a great day. Take care.